Hi, this is Shahida Hill, getting you over the hill to home ownership and helping you confidently buy your first home. I'm with Nicole Sudduth of Bank South Mortgage. She's very popular on this channel because she gives you the best information about the home buying process, especially for first-time home buyers. So Nicole, just take a moment to introduce yourself for people that don't know you.
Hey, I am Nicole Sudduth with Bank South Mortgage. I am a senior mortgage banker, been in the business for over 20 years. Just happy to be here.
Okay, great. Our topic today is going to be all about questions that have come up, I guess, post-pandemic. I know the pandemic is not over, but as everybody had to go through that, they've experienced furloughs, unemployment, things like that, and then they tried to get qualified for a mortgage, and they may have had some difficulty. So I want to go over some of the frequently asked questions around, the pandemic, basically. So the first one is going to be pretty easy, I think. But what about people? Have people come to you and try to qualify using their unemployment income? Can they qualify with unemployment income?
No, they cannot, but yes, they have tried.
Now, why can't they?
Well, you're unemployed, number one.
Long-term unemployment. So
Right.
now I guess they're considering it income, I guess, but.
Well, of course it is income for that person while they're going through this, this horrible situation. But for the purpose of qualifying for a mortgage, it is not considered acceptable income. It's not permanent, income. Unemployment is never permanent. There is going to be an ending date for it for anyone, no matter what. So it has never been a form of acceptable income. And even during the pandemic, it still is not, unfortunately. So,
okay. So we got that question out of the way. Unemployment does not count. All right. So let's go to this one because I've got a lot of this. This is question number 2. I am now a remote worker and would like to use an owner-occupant mortgage, right? Because it's a lower down payment if you're an owner-occupant. What do I need to prove that I'm a remote worker?
That's another one I get weekly.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
So a lot of people are working remotely and have been working remotely for a longer period of time because, we are still in a pandemic. But most employers are not looking at this as a permanent situation. So in order for us to be able to use your employment, say for instance, if you are looking to relocate, because we got a lot of people relocating from other states that want to live here in Georgia and keep their employment, say in California, and want to move to Georgia. If your employer, and we, through a verification of employment that we would do as the lender, will confirm that you can maintain your employment, same salary, and all the terms of your employment will remain the same and you can occupy a primary residence in Georgia, we're fine with that. But we have to be able to confirm that with your employer in order to be able to do that. So.
All right, let's break that down a little bit. So they get a letter from Sally in HR that says, I am currently a remote worker. Tell them that underwriting actually calls, like they actually follow up. I think that a lot of first-time buyers don't know that people, you actually call and follow up to make sure that's accurate.
Yeah, so for the purpose of getting pre-qualified, I will accept a letter from the buyer from their HR department, to get the pre-qualification done, but with the understanding that letter will be verified by the underwriter or the processor or a third party. And it has to be someone in your human resources area. It cannot even be your direct manager. It has to be someone in the payroll area, someone who is authorized to state that you're able to maintain your level of employment in another state. So just keep in mind that I've had a lot of people who assume that, Shahida, right. And were very adamant with me about, no, I can work anywhere. And when I push them to go ahead and have that conversation with their employer to make sure we don't get to a level to a point in the process and you can't get the letter, they find out that the employer they're not okay with that.
Right. They're not okay. You don't want to find out, like you said, you might get pre-approved and under contract, but you won't get through underwriting with that
No.
same letter.
No.
Yeah, I had another agent who had the same thing that happened, and they said they're a remote worker temporarily until they return back to the office. And I guess maybe they were going to quit after that and maybe get a new job. But like you said, you have to, it has to be that they are making you a remote worker.
That's correct. Your employee, not you.
Right. Permanently. All right. So this is our third question. And again, these are all questions that have come up, through this pandemic. Number 4, right, at this point. Number 4, my student loans are on administrative forbearance. Will they still count toward my DTI? Because, all of our student loans, nobody's paying their student loans. Who has student loans? Who has student loans? Yeah. So nobody's paying. Why are you still counting them to my DTI? Biden's about to forgive those anyway.
Yeah, well, until he does. That would be awesome if he does, but until he does, we still have to count them. It's no different than if you were in a deferment or income-based anything. All of that is still a temporary situation. So we have to be able, if you're doing FHA financing, and I know you've talked about this on, several of your videos, the way to work with student loans. If you're doing FHA financing, we still have to count 1% of the balance, no matter what. Okay. If you are doing a conventional loan, we are going to go back to whatever your income-based payment was prior to the pandemic or prior to the CARES Act. And most student loan companies are able to tell you what it will be once this forbearance situation, this CARES Act is over. So, and that's what we'll use for conventional financing.
Conventional financing. Okay, good. All right, so I messed up my numbers. This is really number 4. Okay. I had a break in employment because a lot of people were furloughed during, the pandemic when people weren't sure exactly what was going to happen. A lot of companies furloughed their employees, but now you've regained employment. How will I be able to qualify even though I have that break? I had that break in employment. I know most programs require 2 years of employment, but I, was off work for say 2 months or 3 months. How will that impact me?
You'll find as long as you have gone back to working your normal hours, we're going to qualify you based off of your income that you were making prior to. An extended length of unemployment, FHA's definition of extended length of unemployment is 6 months or more. So if you were furloughed or unemployed, laid off for 6 months, unfortunately, you have to be back to work 6 months with the new employer. You have to be back to work with the new employer before you're able to qualify again. Now, if it was 6 months of a furlough, and I don't know how many employers, are furloughing for that length of time with that same employer, then there can be an exception for that. But if you were furloughed, laid off, I had a young lady who was furloughed, then laid off, then had to find employment again from that situation. So it did go over 6 months. Unfortunately, she has to wait 6 months because she had to find a new employer.
So not a whole another 2 years, but at least 6 months at that new employer.
Yeah, now that's for FHA financing. Conventional, it does not have that same guideline. So you don't have to wait that long if you're able to get conventional financing. But if you're a FHA buyer, you have to wait 6 months with your new employer before you're able to purchase again. It's so unfortunate for people who had to go through this situation to be laid off and then have to delay their home buying process. But those are the guidelines.
Very good to know. All right, so another one. So we're right into 2021, and a lot of people have not filed their taxes yet, but they're considering, thinking about buying a house like March, April. Do they have to wait until they file their 2020 tax return, or can you go ahead and approve them with their 2018, 2019 tax return?
Yeah, 2018 and 2019, that's the same pandemic or not. We don't require you to file your taxes before the federal deadline. So as long as we were before April 15th, we would only require the 2018 and 2019 taxes. If you file your 2020, then we'll use 2020 and 2019, but it's not a requirement.
Could it be beneficial if you made more money in 2020? Would you go ahead and tell them to go ahead and file, or would you just look at like their newest pay stubs for like income? Is
this for self-employed buyer?
No, for salary. let's do both, I guess, but salaried first, because self-employed is complicated, but let's do like just salaried. So they're making more now than they made, I guess, in 2019, and they want to be able to prove that, but they haven't filed their taxes yet. So I guess, will you look at their 2021 like pay stubs to verify that, or will you need the tax return too also?
Yeah, whenever your salary, we're going to look at your pay stubs. We're not looking at your tax returns for qualifying purposes, unless you have some type of employment where it's variable and we're going to have to average it out. But if you're salary, we're not looking at the tax returns for qualifying purposes. Most really, honestly, tax returns are used for self-employed buyers, or we only need the tax returns if you're doing some type of down payment assistance, because they require the tax returns for their purposes. So if you're not doing any type of down payment assistance, or you're not self-employed, we don't even need your tax returns. I don't know if you know that.
No, I didn't know that. I thought tax returns, everybody had to bring them in. All right, so because on the mortgage application, it does say tax returns.
Well, that's because as a what's the best word to use? Process of elimination, we'll ask you for it, but if your program, the type of loan you're doing doesn't require it, we're not going to submit them.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it may be easier sometimes to get them up front just in case we need them, or just in case something. But if your particular program that you're using doesn't require it, we don't disclose it to underwriting.
Okay. Well, see, I'm learning something new all the time. All right. You always have some gems. All right. So this is a big one. Okay. So interest rates are very low, but there's no houses. Interest rates are low. Inventory is also low. So do you think in 2021 that they'll remain low? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but are they expected to remain low through 2021?
Yeah, they are. They are still expected to remain low. Now they're going to remain as low as they were. So I guess it's definition of low, right?
Right. So what's the lowest you've seen? What's the lowest you've closed somebody on? Could you tell that?
The lowest I've closed somebody on is 2%. I've never gone one anything.
Okay, gotcha. 2%, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We did take a little bit of a hike this week for whatever reason, but they're still really low. So low meaning, mid twos for FHA, low threes for conventional. And so I don't see us getting above 4%.
Okay, in 2020.
And I know that may seem high to people, considering how, where we've been, but that's still, 4% is still a low rate.
Okay. Right. It seems like, it's high, 4%. But yeah, I think, higher rate if you can find a house. Right now it's a low rate, but you can't find anything. So it's kind of like, what's the point of the low rate at this point? All right, so number 7, I guess. Forgive me about these numbers. I took out a PPP loan under the CARES Act. And I guess this is for self-employed, because self-employed people were able to take out these loans to kind of get them through the pandemic. And it's going to be forgiven. It's a grant. Will they factor that into my DTI?
Yes, we will. Yeah, with those PPP loans, they still have terms on them until it's forgiven, or if it's not forgiven, or whatever the situation is. But they do have note terms. They have an interest rate, and they have a amortization period on them. So we do count whatever that payment is in your debts.
Okay, good to know. So you can't just say just because it's a grant, or it will become a grant, that you don't count it toward your DTI. So self-employed borrowers, you still need to be mindful that you've taken out that debt, at least for right now, if you're trying to qualify for a mortgage. All right, so my other question is, most sellers, okay? So I put in several offers, right? Sometimes. And they're like, a lot of people are just like, they don't say no FHA, but basically no FHA, right? They want conventional loans. If there's a multiple offer situation, they're typically going to take a conventional borrower over an FHA borrower. Some sellers are more bold about this than others. Like they'll say, we're looking for conventional, we're looking for this. So a lot of the FHA borrowers are kind of going to, losing multiple offer situations. is there any way, like, do you kind of counsel people to say, okay, this is how you could qualify for conventional to try to be more competitive? And how do you feel about, sellers saying, I don't want that FHA?
Well, I have a huge problem with it. It's discriminatory. And most of it is just based off of ignorance, honestly, because there's very little, as far as the seller's concerned, there's no reason in most cases why they wouldn't accept one or the other. It used to be a time where, it was considered that the appraisal process was more stringent for FHA buyers. And so some sellers, depending on the condition of the property, didn't want to use FHA or accept FHA financing because of that. I get it. I understand that, depending on if you're trying to hide something or if it's just a situation where it's as is and it's for a specific type of buyer that doesn't really, care about the condition of the property.
Right.
But other than that, or if they're flipping it, flipping means the sellers own the property for less than 3 months. And you have a lot of that right now with investors coming in, buying properties, renovating them and selling them, in 2 months. FHA requires you to have the seller to have owned the property for 91 days before you can sell it to an FHA buyer. So those, those limited conditions, then you wouldn't accept an FHA buyer. I get that. But outside of that, just this whole thing that the FHA buyer is less qualified, because really, let's be honest, most of that is what this is about, that assumption. That
like a stereotype of FHA borrowers have lower credit scores and FHA borrowers have higher DTI ratios, I guess, or or just not as put together financially as a conventional buyer.
Right, and that's not true. That's not always true. There's some people who do FHA financing with 800 credit scores, especially if they want to use assistance programs that require an FHA loan or whatever. There's all kind of reasons why people can use FHA, and it doesn't always come down to, credit score or, but regardless of what their credit score is or what their asset situation is, whatever, if they are qualified to buy your house, I don't know why you care. The only thing you need to worry about is, will the loan close? And if the loan will close and you get your proceeds, what difference does it make? But to answer your question, because I'm very passionate about that. But,
yes, I hear you.
I'll get off of that, Sheena.
Okay.
But to answer your question about why, what it would take to get to a conventional financing, it's just not that simple. Conventional financing, and I've said this before, it is very and this is the best way I know how to say it. It's very credit profile driven. Okay. So it's not necessarily even as black and white as a credit score. Okay. It'll say minimum credit score, guidelines will say minimum credit score is 640. But what it will take to get a buyer automated approved through the computer system with a 640 is extremely difficult. Gotcha. So that's the issue with trying to explain to a buyer why, if they have a 680 credit score, I can't get an approval for them for a conventional financing. Explain this to buyers, and it's very disheartening for them to have a strong credit score, to have a lower debt to income ratio, to be within certain debt to income ratio guidelines, but the computer still won't accept it.
Right.
So,
or sometimes what I see sometimes is they can do conventional, but the conventional approval amount is so much lower than the FHA approval amount. So they could be approved. So, and it's like this, it's drastic, like 300,000 would be FHA, and it'd be like 165 conventional.
Exactly.
So then they go to FHA.
Because the risk factor for a conventional with that buyer typically means it will accept it, but your debt to income ratio has to be so low, below the normal guidelines, in order for you to accept it, which results in you getting a lower pre-qualification amount, right?
And there's no houses on the market at that price, right? So there's nothing there. All right, so that was a good one. So hopefully you understand, even though, And it is, I said it's difficult. It's one thing, like I know you said they shouldn't care, and they usually didn't care. Like prior to the seller's market, they didn't care. Like you could put an FHA out and they were like, okay, we're just happy to get an offer. But now it is like, yes, these sellers want your firstborn child and, no closing costs, no closing costs, no repairs, and, just gold bars at closing, I guess. What's your number one tip for first-time buyers in this seller's market? Any kind of, advice you can get them on the lending side that could be helpful?
I don't know how this is going to be received by your audience because I know that you are. We're very big on assistance programs, and that's my niche. I do tons of them, but in this market, and you can probably co-sign with me on that that makes it very difficult for people to get contracts accepted. That's just another hurdle. I 100% agree. I stopped even recommending them at this point because it's not, if you FHA and you getting down payment assistance, like don't even bring that thing to our door. So if you're trying to get any kind of down payment assistance, unless it's like something that nobody else wants, and that's, when nobody else wants it, there's usually a reason. But if you're in a competitive situation, don't even bring up down payment assistance. Yeah. So my tip is, to answer your question, is we have to go back to the old fashioned line of thinking where we save our money. Yeah. We save our money for our down payment and we don't rely on programs for that if you want to be a competitive buyer in this market. They're not paying closing costs, like we said, and they don't want your down payment assistance program. So we have to come up with resources to be able to have our own funds for our down payment and closing costs. And I know that that's easier said than done for a lot of people, but that's just me being honest with what I'm seeing as a lender, with people having, all the other struggles with getting contracts accepted.
Right. You have to have some money. In this market, you have to have money. And if you are not able to run, deal with, people in this market with no money, then you have to kind of save. And unfortunately, we don't know what this market's going to look like in the future or next year, but you have to be in a position where you have cash, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just the truth.
That's
right
truth.
Now. Yeah.
Some people don't want to hear it, Shahida, but that's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah, that is the truth. You have to have some money, and I've gotten better with explaining that to people because, like you said, I get a lot of popularity in Atlanta because I would talk about this down payment assistance program. Now I'm like, nah, don't even don't even bring it up. Like, hi. I'm like, oh no, you can't do that because the market changed quick though too. It was like this. Yeah. And, people haven't had a chance to fully react to the change of the market. So we're trying to educate as much as possible. That's why we have this video to say the market has changed and they don't want your down payment assistance.
They don't want it.
It's not that they don't want it and they don't need it. Like they have 30 offers. So it's like, we don't need that. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. These are always great videos. How can people reach you if they want to reach you to get more information about, mortgages or, applying with BankSouth?
So you can reach me on my website at banksouthmortgage.com /M Sudduth, which, of course, my name, MSU.
I'll have it in the description too.
You got to put it out there because there's no way people. Put it in the description.
It's Nicole with it. It's Nicole with an M. I would say that.
Nicole with an M. Yes, Nicole with an M. Yeah. Yes. I'm at BankSouth. Email is msudduth@banksouth.com, and my number is 770-374-1847. But Shahida will give you all the information.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's great information, so they know, what has changed since the pandemic, so they will be prepared when it's time for their pre-approval.
Yes, ma'am. I enjoyed it as usual.
Thank you.